Hello, everyone. This is Stephanie Stavig. I'm with the events team at Minitab. Thank you for joining our webinar, Unleashing the Power of Python using the new Minitab Python integration module. Just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar audio is available through your computer. For the best audio quality, please make sure your speakers or headsets are turned on and the volume is up. Some networks may cause slides to advance more slowly than others. You might need to log off your VPN if you see that issue. This webinar is being recorded. We will send the presentation and recording by email afterwards, so no worries if you need to drop off or want to review anything later. Please feel free to enter questions at any time during the presentation in the questions pane on your right. Please know we do capture all questions and we'll do our best to answer them. We will also be sending you a survey after the webinar is over, so we would appreciate if you could take a few minutes to provide feedback. Thank you for your patience, and we look forward to getting started in about 5 minutes.
Why Python? I mean, why do we have this new functionality added? There's different things that you can present it here, but Python has become a de facto main working environment of a vibrant community of data scientists centered around open source philosophy. So let me say a few more things here. Python, technically, it's a convenient scripting language to accommodate different data processing tasks. When I think about Python, and I've been in the data science and all of this data processing area for close to 2 decades at this point. I remember all the different scripting languages, you know, like Perl, or some of them were very confused, very difficult, and that type of not easy to handle. All of that is eventually converged into this Python community. They basically decided to develop something that they think is most plausible and convenient to use at large in the masses. Now, whether it's the case, the jury is still out there, but hopefully during today's presentations, you'll see what I mean by that. And the nice thing about Python community that it offers a huge diversity of various packages to serve the ever-growing needs of data scientists. So those are the pluses. Those are always something that we'll keep an eye on. However, there's always a but, right? There's always something to be aware of. And it is my opinion that implementing all data analysis steps in Python is not for everyone. You have to be a programmer first and foremost if you want to do it from start to the end. You have to figure things out on your own. Yes, there is this community out there, but you're not necessarily be comfortable with becoming a member of that community. And as in all communities, there's a certain level of expectations that it may have off of you. And you also have to cope with possible errors. Once you are in this type of do-it-yourself environment, you have to do things on your own, which includes the possibility of making an error. And sometimes you may not necessarily get the right answer right away. So even though some of you may have that ability to do everything from start to the end, the reality is that everything comes at a price, and the same thing can be said about Python here. So what's the solution? The solution here is that Python Minitab connectivity, I just call it Python Minitab connector, it allows you to preserve the simplicity and user conveniences of Minitab while getting access to the unique extensions offered on the Python side. I mean, one way to think about it, you will be getting the best of the two worlds. Like, I am a professional statistician, rocket scientist, and a computer scientist. Like, I know Python, C++, and all these other things. Do I want to use Python 100% all the time in my work? Absolutely not, because I actually love the conveniences and advantages of a Minitab environment. Like, every time I want to look at a histogram or a distribution or a chart or a graph or statistics test, I'll use Minitab, because I know I have all of the advantages and all of the conveniences and all of the error proofs of that approach. Now, at the same time, if I want to venture out and explore certain things, kind of step out of the box, or maybe I learn about a new machine learning algorithm out there or some other method or something that is not yet covered on the Minitab side. If that happens, then I can easily step out into the Python. So the purpose of this Python Minitab connector is to allow you to take advantage of that world out there without committing yourself to becoming a professional programmer or scriptwriter or anything like that. So let me continue with this. And first, in order to do Python work using the Minitab side, you have to install Python Minitab connector. And obviously, this presupposes that you need to install the latest version of Python 3. Now, Python, if you ever studied the community, has some interesting history. A while ago, there was a lot of discussion within the community whether they want to adapt the new syntax or a new way of doing things. And they even created some kind of a schism. Sometimes communities argue about certain things. So to make a long story short, they ended up with two different branches. One is known as Python 2, the other one is known as Python 3. Now, all of the old members that have accumulated tons of scripts, they use Python 2. But all the new comers into that particular area, they started using Python 3, which has an improved syntax and some of the better, kind of the future stands on its side. So we've committed on Minitab to support Python 3. If you are in the Python 2 world, I'm sorry, you would have to either run both versions or have it basically at some kind of transition to Python 3. We also recommend Anaconda distribution. It's available here. But pretty much any implementation of Python 3 out there, any distribution will do. We do not require anything fancy. The way we approach it and the way we recommend is that you simply add Python to the system path during the Python installation. Now, if you install Python using Anaconda, it will offer all sorts of fancy options like environments and all of the stuff, that computer scientists love. My recommendation, keep it simple. And the way to keep it simple is just make sure that you have Python 3 running on your system, and you may need to ask the help of either someone on the IT side or someone like that to help you with that. You only need to do it once, and once it's done, you're ready to go. Now, how do you check that you have Python running on your system? There's a very simple check that you can do it. And let me just, I'll be doing quite a bit of back and forth here. So I have a command prompt here running. And by the way, if you don't know how to do it, you just simply basically go into the your Windows dialog here. You type in CMD command prompt, and then you launch it, and then you have it running here. I mean, for the most part, you don't have to use that, but one way to check whether you have Python running on your system, if you type in Python dash capital V and enter, if you have Python successfully installed and visible from your system, then you should see something like that. In fact, I think the latest version is 3.8 dot something, but 3.7 is already good enough for our purposes. Okay, so you have to get the Python running. That's one thing. Another thing, you need to make sure that you have the mtb-py package, which is what we provide. And that's the package that includes the actual connector. So if you want to have Minitab 19.2020.1 interacting with Python, you would have to install mtb-py package on the Python side. And again, you only need to do it once, and you can ask for somebody's help to help you with that. Usually there's different ways things can be installed on the Python side, like Anaconda has its own installers and things like that. But the most basic and traditional way to install things in Python is using this so-called pip installer. And the pip installer requires you to have access to the so-called wheel file. And this is the kind of stuff that we will provide, okay? And once you have the wheel file, and again, we can sort out all the details later, it literally boils down to as simple as running this thing in your command prompt, and oftentimes you would have to have an administrative access to your machine because it might put some files in the sensitive areas on your system. But once that is done, you're pretty much ready to go. And that's why, as I pointed out from the beginning, you don't need to go to any of the fancy stuff on the Python side in terms of environments and all the other things. All you need to make sure is that your Python is visible from anywhere in your system and that you have this MTB package installed so that Minitab can see it. Okay, so assuming that you went through these two steps, and again, we can provide some help, or you can ask someone on your end to lend you a hand. You only need to do it once. The very first thing you need to do is you need to check whether Minitab sees that Python. And one way to do it is by basically first, you would need to configure Minitab to point to the location of your Python scripts. And then you would need to put a test.py script in that location and execute the pysc command using Minitab command line. In a short while, I'll show exactly what to expect. But once you go through all of these steps, once you execute that command, you should see that Minitab sees Python. And then it will go like this. First, you'll do the options general. You will pick the default file location for the location of your Python scripts. Then you'll run the command line using this, and then you should see a message that confirms that Minitab successfully located your Python installation. Without further ado, let me go ahead and switch to Minitab here. So this is the Minitab version that I mentioned, right? 19.20.20.1. So if you have anything lower than that, none of this will work because this is the new functionality that has been added to this version, okay? Now, notice what you do here. You go on the File Options, and in my particular case, I placed all of the files in CMG Python folder. You could put it on a desktop, you could put it anywhere you like, but once you have those files, that location specified, from now on, all the references in the command line that do not include the exact path indicators will automatically look in that location, and this way it's easier for me to structure the rest of my work. And once you have this configuration and you placed a test.py test script in that location, and all of the Python scripts that I will be using today will be available to you. So you will see them in the presentations, and you will also be able to run those on your own. But at this point, as long as you can execute this command, so you basically type in this command, press the run button, and if everything works fine, you should see this happy message: Minitab successfully located your Python installation. So again, to summarize, you need to have Python 3 running on your system and visible from the system path. You need to have Python Minitab connector, that MTB Py package installed on the Python side, and you should be able to execute a Python script from the default location called test.py to see this message. If you cannot get to this point, you will not be able to do anything else. So this is basically laying the foundation for the rest of the presentation today. So let me go back to slides. And here, this one here. Okay, so how does it work? If you want to think in terms of like what we're doing here, we have Minitab side, the Minitab environment that has all of this kind of user conveniences and interactive displays and interfaces and everything. And then you have this Python side in the background that you want to communicate with. Now, the simplest operation that you can conceive of is what we call passing the constants around. And the way it works is the following. In the command line, and again, this would be a good point to start working with the command line in case you haven't done it until now, because there's some of these tasks that we'll be doing, they're inevitably linked to the command line. But in the Minitab command line, there's a very convenient command that allows you to define different things. We call them constants. So they always start with a capital K, and they can be numbered 1 through whatever. And then you can assign either numeric values, real or integer, and text values to any of the constants, okay? And our very first task here will be to assign a few constants here and pass them onto the Python side. And here's how it's done. You define 2 constants here, then there is a script that we will execute on the Python side that will attempt to get these 2 constants and print them out, okay? So here's what's gonna happen on the Python side. The very first line, I mean, this here, I'm going to be basically writing a Python script that will be executed here. So first it says, we are going to load our connector, mtbpy connector. And if that connector is not installed, the process will break here with an error message, okay? Now, the next part of the script will actually use this special calling API, and that's what we're using here today, to actually get values of the constants that you've defined on the Minitab side. Okay, so the get constant function allows you to grab any constant that was defined on the Minitab side during this particular command line session, okay? And in this case, the constant K1 is saved into K1. The constant K2 is saved into K2. So as far as the Python side is concerned, now you have access to whatever was entered on the Minitab side, okay? Now, what can you do with these constants? You know, every time you introduce a new program, you have this hello world or something like that. Well, the easiest way to do here is to basically say, now that we see these 2 constants on the Minitab side, let's pass them back. On the Python side, let's pass them back for display on Minitab side. And this is accomplished by the facility that allows you to write messages back into Minitab. And this is called add message. And again, you'll start seeing some of this Python syntax. Don't be concerned right now, because as you will see later on, a lot of these tasks can be done by someone else, and you can only take advantage of all of that additional work, okay? But at this point, what I'm doing, I'm saying, to add message back to Minitab that I received constant K1, and this is going to be the value of that constant. And likewise, I received K2, and this is going to be the value of K2. And once this is done, this is my simplest beginner script here. The execution is finished. The control goes back to Minitab, and on the Minitab side, you should be able to see the output of these add messages in the Minitab standard output. So that's the idea. And let me quickly illustrate how it works in action. Okay, so what I will do here, I will get my script, and in order to do that, I put together some of these notepad placeholders so that it can save us some time. So I'm going to define these two constants, okay, K1 and K2, and I'm going to execute get constant script. And now I already confirmed that Python is running fine, so I expect to get that script successfully executed, and all of the thing that happened in the background, now I received the output back on my Minitab side. Now notice, once I have the script, and once I know what that script is supposed to do, at this point, I don't need to worry about Python. In fact, someone else could have created that script for you and just told you, okay, define those two constants, and this is what's going to happen. So we have our very first extension. It doesn't do that much. I mean, it's basically useless as far as functionality is concerned, but it highlights a very important point of how to define some things on the Minitab side, pass them over to Python, let Python do something with that, and report it back, okay? Gradually, we're going to start building the rest of the structure on top of this. So let me switch back to the Python, to the slides, and continue with the next level up. Now that we learned that we can pass a constant around back and forth, how can we pass a column onto the Python side? Suppose I have something on Minitab that has open some kind of data set. And I have variables X and Y. I also have the columns, standard naming C1 and C2. Well, it turns out that we provide now the ability to communicate any of these columns onto the Python side using the add column command. So one way to see it is the following. Again, I can define two constants. In this case, these are either a variable name or the column name, okay? And then I have another script here, which you will have access to, so you can play around with it after we're done with this webinar. So what that script will do is the following. So again, once I hit the run button here, this Minitab script will be executed. The control will be passed over into Python. And this Python script, get column py, has this content. First, it loads the connector. This is going to be the standard for all scripts. Then it calls another function to receive columns from Minitab as Python lists. And notice how it's done. It actually saying, first, I'm going to get these constants K1, K1, and K2, okay? And remember, K1 and K2 is the names of columns in this case. So it's either X or C2. So you can either reference by variable name or by column name. And once I have these variable names here, I can use another function in Python, get column, to actually receive all of the values of the variable 1 into the list 1, okay? And likewise, I can also receive all of the values of variable 2 into list 2. Now, let's pause here. What I've just accomplished on the Python side in these few lines that you can use and reuse for whatever future purposes is I basically said, I'm going to load two variables here called list1 and list2 based on the user specifications. List1 will be variable X, list2 will be variable Y. And at this point, I can do whatever I want with those variables, I can process them, do numeric computations, unleash all these other things that Python open source community allows me to do. And in this case, I'll just do a very simple task. I'll basically say, okay, now that I have these variables, I'm just going to send them back to Minitab just to confirm that I received those two variables. And this is what I see inside of the Python. Now, don't get alarmed by all of this mess here. I mean, welcome to open source. That's why I pointed out that Python is not for everyone in terms of programming it from scratch, from start to finish. However, you can easily use some of these things as templates because you could do most of your work on Minitab and only resort to these critical extensions in order to try things out or perhaps do something that is out of the box. And again, once the script is finished this work, it passes the control back to Minitab. And what you see here is the printout of all of those values that were passed. And in this case, that's basically what we have. So let me switch to Minitab side and show exactly what's going on. Now, of course, if you want to pass certain columns and certain variables, you have to have your data set opened in the first place. So what I will do here, I put in that MG Python, I have a whole bunch of files here. All we need to do is get this file called small.csv, and it has only two variables, x and y, 5 observations. So I open the data set, and at this point, again, all I want is get column.py. So that's the actual script that you will get as part of our communication here. And again, all I'm doing is I'm basically saying I need to define two constants, x and c2, and I want to execute the get column.py script to see the output that I expect to see. And again, if everything works fine, it defines these constants, it calls the Python script, it shows that it received, and it reports back what it received. It's always a good idea when you run these Python interaction activities is to use the add message here and there so that you can actually confirm what you saw on the other side inside of the type of a black box, not the Python thing that we're talking about, okay? Okay, so I'm going to get back to the slides here and to rehash what we've accomplished so far. We managed to define a constants that reference variables, and we managed to pass the entire variable onto the Python side. Now, if you think about it, with these two simple pieces of functionality, you can accomplish a lot of interesting tasks. And that will be the core part of today's discussion of today's webinar. So I want you to think about everything else up until now as some kind of prepping work to focus on this slide that shows the general structure of what you can do and the power behind it. So we can define constants and we can pass certain columns around. Okay, that's all fine. That's all good. But what about manipulating data sets? Like at this point, we do not provide the ability to pass the entire data set from Minitab side onto the Python side. However, it's not really needed because you can open that same data set on the Python side using the specifications that you supply as part of your input constants. And here's what I mean. Suppose I have a data set, again, it's the same one, X and Y, which I called small.csv. But you could also have another data set that could have thousands of records, hundreds of variables, like anything CSV. In fact, it could have all sorts of internal things, dates, characters. There's a lot of complex, complicated stuff. How do we make that data set available to Python? Well, it turns out it actually is pretty straightforward. What you could do, you could basically tell Python the name of the data set that you want to work with. So suppose I have this data set that I called small.csv, and I want to do some manipulation with the data set. Let's say I want to take a variable y in that data set and multiply it by 10, and then you create a new variable called new y such that it has the variable y multiplied by 10 on every value here. And again, it's just an example. So the typical manipulation with the data set includes several core parts, right? You need to define the name of the data set. And in this case, it's the small CSV, but it could be large or huge or whatever. You need to also specify a variable or multiple variables that you're going to process, that you're going to work with. Well, in this case, we just call it the variable y, but it could have been x, y, could have been 100 variables there. All you need to do is define a constant for all of those variables. Then you need to define the name of a new variable that you want to create and also certain parameters. Well, all of this can be included and clarified by using a set of let statements with the corresponding constants. And all you need afterwards is to have a Python script that knows what those constants mean, and they can process your input data set and store a new data set that you can later open on the Minitab side. So that's basically the most general way to handle entire data sets, including multiple data sets on the Python side. So here's what's going to happen. Once I execute this, the control goes into the Python side. And of course, first you're loading certain libraries. And in this case, Python facility that is handling entire data frames is known as pandas. So you better start getting used to some of this open source community jargon and definitions and all of the packages. For Python, you would need to learn things like NumPy and pandas. Now, pandas is the facility that processes entire data frames. Just like, like in R, there's a concept of data frame. Same in Python. They have pandas, which is everything that has to do with data sets. Okay. Now, first and foremost, we need to receive parameters from the Minitab side. Well, we already know how to do it, so I'll skip it, but it's going to be basically a whole bunch of calls, get constant, right? The main part of this script will be to load the data set, which in this case, small CSV, but it could be any data set that you like because you have full control over what data you're indicating here. And the loading of a data set is done by read_CSV function of the pandas facility in Python. And again, the reason why I'm putting all these files is that you might have never heard of Python, but what you will see, I mean, you've probably heard about it, but you might have never used it on your end. But you can actually see that if you follow these simple procedures, it's a no-brainer to do these tasks as long as you're not trying to do something elaborate or something fancy. And in this case, all I'm doing is I'm loading input file into a data set. And then I use pandas facility to create a new variable in my data set such that it takes the original variable and multiplies it by number 10. Okay, so we get this here. And there's some noises for some reason. Yeah, and that wasn't me for sure. There's something going on the other end. Uh, so it's kind of funny. I mean, we live in these interesting times. I mean, that's there's all these technologies and all the challenges that we have to deal with, and I wish we had better times right now than other some of these challenges. But it's actually quite fascinating that the things that we can do together, and like even in these types of situations. So, anyways, going back here, you're creating a new variable. So then you're saying data set variable that exists there, and it's going to be variable y times the multiplier that we supplied, and the end result is going to be in a new variable here, and then we're going to save it back into the output file. Okay, so think about it. What this Python script does, and you can actually see the full script. I mean, we'll send it to you because there's some parts that I skipped here because I cannot physically put everything on one screen. But once you get this, you can do all of the manipulation here with your data. You can create new variables, you can merge multiple data sets, you can do anything you like. And then the end results are saved into the output file, and that you can open that output file back on the Minitab side and get the results of your processing. So when I write message to Minitab, I basically say finished processing. The control goes back to Minitab, and it basically shows these are the parameters that it received, and you expect to have that output data set that we named here with the results of all of the manipulation. So let me just do this here, Minitab, and let me quickly highlight the same procedure and what to expect. So I'm going to this process CSV. This is the full version of the data set. Those are the parts that I skipped. See this big block here. When I received all of these constants, K1, K2 through K5, and these are my input file, variable, new variable, multiplier, and output file. And you can feel free to modify these files to your heart's desires. As I said, you don't have to be a Python programmer once you understand the general picture here. And this first block, I'm just getting my constants from the Minitab side. The second block, I'm just reporting these things back by saying, look, this is what I see. So in case you messed up and you understand why Python script is producing an error, at least you can see whether you assigned proper constants and what the script actually expects. And then all you're doing is just saying, I'm going to read CSV, I'm going to do some processing with that data set, and I'm going to save it to the output data set. And this is going to be the end of my work on the Python side. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. And let me get it here, put it here. By the way, hash signs, those are Python comments. So any line that starts with a hash is ignored by Python, and that's the useful way to put some comments or other things there. But I basically say, here's my script. I know its interface. In fact, you could have asked someone to write that script for you as long as they see the template and the pattern that I've included. And when you say run, we expect it to take that small .csv data set, take the variable y in the data set, multiply it by 10, save that in the variable new y, and save the entire output data set in this small processed .csv. Now, one thing you will notice, once the control goes into the Python side, it may take some time. And it's not that Python is so slow that even taking these 5 observations, it took it, what, like 15 seconds to multiply by 10. This is a bit misleading because there's a lot of things that are happening once it gets into the Python side. And in this particular script, we need to load the connector, we need to load the entire pandas library. So that loading takes some seconds. But once it's been loaded, the rest of the operation happens very quickly. So the time to process 5 lines in the data set will be not far behind the time it will take to process 1,000 lines or even 1 million lines. Okay, so the beauty of Python, once all these things were loaded, the rest happens very quickly. But you do have a little bit of overhead as you execute these scripts and passing the control from here to there and back. So keep that in mind. There's another thing here, and I anticipate there might be some questions on that, and we can talk about it tomorrow. What you will also notice, once you pass things into the Python side, you have to wait for that whole script to execute, and that may take some time. So in the future versions, or hopefully we will add like a little facility here that will at least allow you to monitor the stages of execution of that script. But right now in this first implementation, you just have to wait. And then it either finishes successfully and you see some diagnostic messages here, or it comes back with an error, in which case you will see an error here. But that's pretty much the simplest implementation for now that you would have to cope with. We'll make it better. We'll make it easier to use eventually. We might also come up with a way to have an interface running on top of this, okay? So that's the core part here. Once again, you have a very simple kind of model script, a template script here that you can modify from now on that accomplishes a very important prototypical task. It loads the data set, it manipulates the data set, and it saves it as an output data set. So what I expect to see now, I expect to have that small processed CSV in my working folder, and that's exactly what happens. So when I open it back to Minitab, I get this new y, which is exactly the variable that I asked to be created. Okay, so here's my resulting output. And again, you could have multiple data sets. You could do all sorts of things. You can do merges, you can do sorts, you do anything you like on the Python side. You can create multiple output data sets. You could even hook up the system that does parallel processing or some Hadoop execution, who knows? There's a lot of fancy stuff you can do on the Python side, yet it's all being encapsulated in this Python script. And as long as you have the proper interface to call it, everything else will be done from now on in this powerful, encapsulated, extended way. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's probably the most important thing to have. And this slide is literally prototypical of main bulk of work that you will ever need to do with Python. That's where the actual power is unleashed, and it uses very simple commands like passing the constants around, doing some work, opening data, saving data, and writing diagnostic messages back into the Minitab side. Now, interesting enough, this is not the only thing you can do. You can do a few more things, and here notice I basically put together like this output here. But the next part I will show that in addition to inserting messages into Minitab from the Python side, you can also insert images, and this is how it works. Suppose I have an image, a Bing file on my system called Happy Face. And all I want to do is I want to let Python load that image and pass it back to Minitab for display. And again, I've created a simple script, add image.py. And what that script does is it again loads a Minitab connector, that it transfers parameters from Minitab. So it gets the constant K1, to know what is the input file that I'm asking, okay? Then it provides user feedback. It uses the add message just as before to make sure, okay, this is the input data set or input image or whatever you call it, right? So you can edit it. And then the new command that we're introducing here is how we can get the ping file and push it back onto the Minitab output. And this is this so-called add image function that the MTB-Py connector has. So if you get that input file, and I could have bypassed the constant and simply put the name of the file here, inside of the Python script, but it would make it less universal, right? So now I have add image, a universal script that I say, oh, all that script expects is the name of the image file passed as a constant K1, okay? So always think in terms of universality of your scripts, or even write a specification for some of your colleagues to say, look, I don't want to mess around with Python or anything, but because we have this connectivity here, here's what I need. I'm going to get these constants K1, K2, K3, etc., that indicate this, this, and this, and here is what I need. So you write the specification of the interface to your script, then you ask someone who knows Python and who also knows the API for this MTB-Py connector to write that script for you. Once you have that script, you can use it all the time. So literally have like your own macro that extended the functionality of Minitab for you. So when you have that add image, control passes back to Minitab, and you have this, in this case, this happy nerdy face, which is probably how I look right now, so that you can actually see what happens. All right, so let me quickly illustrate how it works. And again, so we are, I think I've not even, it's basically say happy face dot png, and we don't need all these other constants here. And then this, I believe it's called add underscore image. And let's try to run this script here. And hopefully I haven't made any mistake. It should execute. Okay, and I did make a mistake. So, and it's a great exercise to show what must happen. It basically says, oh, there's no such file or directory, happy face. Okay, so I made a mistake. I've added a typo here. So I removed that and I tried again. And hopefully this time everything will work fine. Okay, and I have my happy face here, looking happily at me with a some satisfaction. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. You can add messages, you can add images. Is that the only thing you can do? Well, there's one more thing that you can do, and that is you can insert a table. And again, once you get the general idea, it's actually pretty straightforward. Suppose in this case, I just insert a table into Minitab without providing any further specification on Minitab side. So inside of the Python, what I will do, I will create two columns. And this is a Python way to create a character column and a numeric column. And then I will use the add table function to send these two columns with the following headers, the following title, and the following footnote back into the Minitab output. So if I execute this script, this simple script right here, and send it back to Minitab, this is what I will get. I'll get a simple table, right? Simple table. These are the contents, the two columns with the titles word and frequency. These are the actual values, and the footnote goes here. So now you have a very simple prototype how to insert just one table. And of course, you're not limited to only two columns. You could create as many columns as you like. You could create as many values as you like. In fact, those could be coming from elsewhere in your Python scripts. But once all of that columns are organized, you can insert them into the Minitab side. And again, just to quickly illustrate here, It's that script that we called add table. And again, I want to be careful here to avoid errors. And if I run this guy, I expect to have that table inserted right inside of my Python script output. So I see this simple table, word frequency, and I have all of the advantages of this table processing machinery. It will be paged, it will be nicely allocated, it will honor all of the user controls, so we'll get all of the conveniences of Minitab right here. So what have we done so far? We have seen that you can establish interfaces to your Python script, so you can pass the constants around. You can write messages back, you can write images back, and you can also write tables back. So let me finish this webinar with a little bit of exploration and fun, okay? Just to see how having these little pieces that I've just defined allows you to do all sorts of interesting, fun activities. Of course, that presupposes at least some familiarity with some of these Python tasks and everything. And that's where you can either try to learn things on your own or ask for somebody else's help. There is this script called words.py. Here's what it does. There is this Python package called word cloud. And what that package does, it allows you to take any text and summarize words in that text as some kind of nice cloud image. Make the long story short, there's a whole bunch of import that you're doing from Python. And in fact, I grabbed this script off of the Python community. And we also have other people engaged on the Python side here at Minitab. So there's a lot of scripting that we shared with each other. So I did not put together this one. I've just used it. And once you know how to use it, it's actually pretty cool. So in order to generate the word cloud, all you need to do is you need to have a data set. In this case, it's a text file that contains coffee reviews. It's just a whole bunch of text, a whole bunch of reviews about different brands of coffee, okay? So you can open the data set, and I could have passed the name of the file through a constant here. See, I could be more creative or more generic in this case. And then it's converted into lowercase, and then it loads a cloud, kind of a template, like a little image of a cloud. And then it calls this word cloud package. Again, I'm taking advantage of open source at this point to create that word cloud. So it generates the cloud based on the data set of coffee reviews. And then this data set is this image of the word cloud is saved as a PNG file. See, at this point, I'm just taking advantage of open source community. There's people out there who are dedicating their lives and careers to having this stuff available to everyone else. So we're just using it here. And once I have that PNG file, I send it back to Minitab for display. And once you send it back, you get to see this. And isn't it cool? Is I have this little word cloud that shows in different sizes all of the individual words that were discovered in this coffee reviews txt file, and this is what you get. And again, look how simple it is to run it in Minitab. And this is basically this words.py. This is the full script, and I'll just skip it here. And all we need to do is get this script and execute it here, words.py. So if I run it, I expect to see that cloud once it stops its execution. And again, remember what I said, it may take a while to run all of these things, and because now it needs to load the NumPy package, word cloud package, all these different things that Python is doing. But once all of that is finished, you expect to see what we were expecting to see here. See, so now I basically took advantage of a totally unique new piece of functionality otherwise not available to me. And to finish this off, there's a follow-up, the continuation of the script, where what Python does, it actually creates arrays of words and frequencies. Then it uses Python loop to populate these arrays with words and their frequencies. And then it sends the add table, remember the last thing we learned today, to actually create a table of words and frequencies. And this is what gets displayed here as this table, and this is what you saw and the output of this script in Minitab. If I scroll down, it actually created these word cloud data as a table, and as you can see, the tables can get pretty large, and the API allows you to do that. Okay, so to summarize, what we learned today is that you have this powerful ability to extend anything in Minitab onto the Python side. So you can create constants, and you can use these constants to pass the information into the Python script so that the script knows what to do. And once inside of the script, you can write messages back, you could add images back, and you could write tables back. And everything else you do on the Python side will allow you to get access to all the open source community. As I pointed out, you basically get the best of the two worlds. You keep the conveniences of Minitab, and at the same time, you gain access to out-of-the-box thinking of open source, where you can do all these interesting things. So go out there, explore, and have fun. In a few months, I will come back. Hopefully, we'll have another webinar when I'll show how to use that same machinery. A lot of fun with text mining. So this way you will be able to use new algorithms, new parts, and the new kind of areas of research that are currently not yet available in Python, in Minitab, and yet through this power of Python connector, you will be able to run those on your end. So explore, have fun, and I'll see you next time, okay? And with that, on that happy note, I will end my part.
Thanks, Mikhail. So as you may or may not know, today's webinar was the third in our new series, Webinar Wednesdays. Each Wednesday, we'll host a free webinar featuring tools and expert tips and tricks to help you continue working smarter and more efficiently during these uncertain times. Next week's webinar will feature Cheryl Pammer, a senior advisory statistician with Minitab. She's presenting the first of a three-part series on machine learning. Then, each Thursday, we'll also host Minitab Meetups, our new casual 30-minute live chat to connect you with our experts and users around the globe to discuss the challenges being faced and explore solutions together. All questions are welcome, including any questions that are unanswered today. We're excited to announce that we are offering our signature best-in-class Minitab trainings, now virtually. Learn directly from our expert statisticians from anywhere. Our upcoming trainings include Minitab Essentials on May 12th through 14th and Statistical Quality Analysis and Factorial DOE on May 19th through 21st. If you're interested in attending any of our upcoming webinars, meetups, or virtual trainings, please sign up through the links on your screen, and the links will also be included in our follow-up email to you. And finally, for those of you who are not familiar with us, I wanted to also say a few words about Minitab. For nearly 50 years, Minitab has helped companies spot trends, solve problems, and discover valuable insights in their data by delivering a comprehensive and best-in-class suite of statistical analysis and process improvement tools. The companies that use our products and services come in all sizes, industries, and geographies, including over 85% of the Fortune 500. One thing they all share is their commitment to excellence. Our goal is to help them achieve it. So we invite you to visit minitab.com to learn more about our products, such as Minitab Statistical Software, Companion by Minitab, Quality Trainer, Salford Predictive Modeler, and our latest product, Workspace. We offer both public and private trainings, as well as statistical consulting services for specific business problems. You can find out more about each of these services at minitab.com/training. I'd also encourage you to explore minitab.com/support, where you can find helpful software videos, contact information for our world-class technical support team, data sets, and much more like our latest blogs and case studies. So join us tomorrow for Minitab meetups at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. To register, you can go to minitab.com/events. And please remember you will receive the webinar recording, a quick survey, and more in our follow-up email. On behalf of all of us at Minitab, we very much appreciate you for taking the time to join us today, especially given the current environment and uncertain times we're living through. We wish you all the best, stay safe and healthy. Thanks again, goodbye.